Mini-episode 1222 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Well, let's go to the pay-per-view that you had here, SummerSlam 02. I will tell you this, and again, there were a lot of isolated great moments in the WWF/E in 02. It's the only year you could ever say that about because it's the year the transition happened from F to E. And again, SmackDown 6 and things like that. But there was a hipster take that I saw on just when you Google WWE 2002. Somebody wrote a column a long time ago. I don't remember if it was for Bleacher Report or somebody was like, 2002 was the greatest year in WWE history. And I'm sitting there going, not even close, particularly when you look at all of the flame-out business decisions that they made and how much better it could have been but for the creative and but for the politics and Steve Austin basically leaving the company mid-year. But, you know, it was a year where it had its moments here and there. I mean, Hogan and Rock at WrestleMania, as counterproductive as the booking was coming out of that, there were isolated great moments through the year. And SummerSlam 02, I've always thought stacks up as one of the best slam cards they had.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best opening matches of all time, Kurt Angle versus Rey Mysterio, which at that time was a dream match.
Yes.
It had never happened before, so that was a dream match at the time. You had Rob Van Dam versus Chris Benoit, which are arguably another dream match. You even had an inoffensive Undertaker v. Kent match.
Right.
Which was, you know, it could have been horrible. No, it was actually pretty good. You got the return to the ring. We got the return to the ring of HBK for the first time in 4 years against his running buddy Triple H, and they tore the house down. And then you had the part of the reason why I thought that for me is you got the absolute rise to prominence of Brock Lesnar, just going from being rookie monster to defeating The Rock in a match that that quite frankly Rock's never gotten his win back from that, and the crowd at that point in time was solidly behind Lesnar. And even the ongoing story back and forth between the two different breaks and everything, and I just thought, I just feel top to bottom, if I'm going to watch a card begin again, I've probably seen that card beginning to end at least, 30 times.
I haven't watched it as many times, but yeah, there's so much fun stuff on that show. And I will say as well, and at the risk of sounding like Smarkerson, I'm going to use this guy's real name because I feel like his ring name held him back more than almost anything else. I've always felt that Andrew Test Martin was one of the more underutilized big guys that there's been, because you talk about being surprised on that. Man, that's a guy that could go under the right circumstances. His match with Eddie Guerrero at WrestleMania 17, I mean, it may not be in my top 3 or 4 favorite things about that card because I love that card so much, but it was, again, a very underrated match as well. And that's a guy where, and again, I know he had his demons and everything like that, and that might have played into it of why he didn't get a bigger push, although clearly he was misutilized, underutilized in the wake of the whole Triple H Steph marriage thing here. He should have been a red-hot babyface coming for revenge after that, but I mean...
Why wasn't he should have been the one to replace Stone Cold Steve Austin. The crowd would have eaten it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when Austin ran over, they went with the big show. I remember sitting there watching that when he comes out, so I'm like, why?
Yeah.
And then someone goes, must be in his contract.
Well, yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things.
Makes no sense.
Right. And that's almost like the story of his career. All these things that made no sense, which again, none of that is his fault. I mean, again, the things with the substance abuse, yes, that might have interfered with him getting a bigger push, but when they brought him back in like 06 and 07, and they put him in ECW rather than on SmackDown or Raw, and it was kind of like, why? I mean, I guess at the time it was the storyline of Paul Heyman is building the new ECW, but between him and Hardcore Holly, it just sort of had that cast-off kind of a feel. And I always felt like, man, this guy is being underutilized here. He should be on one of the two main shows. And yeah, that's a guy that I always felt like was capable of better than what he was given.
I agree with you there. And the thing about, you remember his 06 run, like, they never really mentioned that he was there before. It was almost like they acted like he was a new guy. Like,
yeah.
Because he had his hair cut short and all that other stuff. And it's just like, you know, they tried to put him with Stacy with the whole testicles thing. And then he got stuck in purgatory hell with Scott Steiner, who couldn't work by that point.
Right.
Everyone's like, why did they work Hugh Steiner better? Because he couldn't move.
Yeah, and that's where, I mean, for the love of God, if you're going to bring him in and you're going to pretend you didn't have him there before, call him Andrew Martin or give him another name. Go the whole night. Don't call him Test again. Stupidest name. You know, a name that didn't mean anything in the course of the business. Yeah, I just, it was so god-awful. There's just so much about the mishandling of that guy's career that makes me sad, as well as the fact that he's not here anymore. And when we're looking at this, I refer to this, you had another non-pay-per-view on here as well, but a Clash of the Champions match, card, Clash 17. So I'm looking at it like, okay, well, Bobby Eaton, Firebreaker Chip, I see you working. Stunning Steve Austin, PN News, yo baby, yo. So sure, it had a lot of great moments, Jake.
Was it, did I put the right one on there? That's what I'm thinking of, is the one that opens with Sting getting a gift from Luger.
Yeah, that is the one. You have this, and you have this, the Sting.
Sure, those matches were there.
Right.
But as far as the overall story, those would be the Artest and Guerrero matches or whatever. It's not nearly as good. You know?
Yes.
But I have it on there more overall just because of beginning to end as like for someone watching a show and watching a wrestling event. Like, okay, what's going to happen here? You got the beginning of it where Sting is the ever-present idiotic babyface. Comes out and gets a miracle gift, a magical gift, whatever. Medusa's line's like, what do you want? Wow. Then, of course, you know, we find out that the World Heavyweight Champion is all the time, Lex Luger, comes out and hits him in the knee from behind and set up there's their match at the upcoming Super Brawl. And then you have the whole thing with Paul E. Dangerous using litigation from talking about how it was put in, this contract clause was put into the contract of when Rorschach was promoting at the Cow Palace back in like the 1950s. And Paul E. Dangerously, he said, look at it right there. You can see it's right there in the paper. You can read yourself. Give me that. I'm not lying this time. And then he leaves and goes, yeah, Sting has to get back here or else, you know, he forfeits the United States Championship. So you've got that whole story arc. Then you've got one of the greatest moments of all time, and my favorite Ricky Steamboat moment of all time, where he debuts as street partner for the Natural Dustin Rhodes, replacing an injured Barry with them against the enforcers of Arn Anderson and Barry Zbyszko. And what might be my favorite professional wrestling moment in history is when Arn Anderson looks directly in the camera and goes, I'm Ricky Steamboat. He's just a man. He's just a man.
If you didn't mention he's just a man, I was going to.
Yeah, he's just a man. He sells Ricky Steamboat like it's the biggest things in sliced bread.
Yeah.
And like, holy crap! And like, you get that moment of them winning the World Tag Team titles. You get a terrible, I think it's Rick Steiner and Luger for the
world title. Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
That match is there. And then you get the climax of Ravishing Recruit Sting running to the building to help all his friends trying to help get to the building to get to defend the title. The Valiant Babyface gets in there and loses.
Yeah.
And then the next week on TV, and then the follow-up, you find out that beautiful Bobby was actually sabotaging him because he was part of the Dangerous Alliance all along.
Yes. And it was...
Well, absolutely. When I think of me as being a wrestling fan of an entire show, it's like top to bottom. That is one of the ones that pops into my head because it's got so many names on there, so many moments. And, you know, it's got some good wrestling, it's got some terrible wrestling.
Well, I don't know if you did this on a conscious level or not. Probably not. But I am seeing a through line in your three picks here. You have SummerSlam 02, which elevated Brock Lesnar to a spot that he's really not been knocked off of since in the wrestling pantheon. You have WrestlePalooza 97, the masterpiece booking, the ultimate masterpiece booking of Paul Heyman. And then Paul Heyman as a manager, top to bottom, on Clash 17. I see you working, Jake Digman.
Yeah, you like that?
Yeah, very good.
I guess I'm very much a Paul Heyman guy.
Yes, you are. Nothing wrong with that, though. He's got a lot of great things to his credit in the world of wrestling.
There's something else that wasn't on my list, and I don't know that it's on anybody else's list, so I'm just going to throw it out there.
All right.
Because as far as, like, must-view, like, I think of something incredible must-view that I don't know if it's still streaming, make it Memphis.
Oh, yeah.
USWA, the story of Vince McMahon playing a heel for the first time ever in 1993 against Jerry Lawler. If you've never seen that, I highly, highly recommend it.
Yes.
Especially knowing, like, it's like, I thought, late 1992, early 1993, I want to say.
Yeah.
Somewhere around that era. Because, like, Bret Hart's the WWE champion, and he goes down there as a heel for Vince. To help Vince. Vince actually appears at one of the shows, too, at the Memphis Coliseum as a total heel in 1993. He's cutting these heel promos. It is to see something as an absolute mind warp. Mr. McMahon, 5 years before he actually existed. It's some pretty good stuff.
Well, here's the thing, too, Jake, and this is, when you look at it, it's one of these things where we are so lucky in the world of wrestling that nobody could foresee back in the early 90s what was to come with YouTube and everything else like that, because to Vince, this was an itch that he wanted to scratch. He'd always wanted to be involved in the business as a character/performer, but he didn't want it to get in the way of his day job, which was running the WWF at the time and also being an announcer. So it's like, I'll go down there, it'll just be on local TV. Yeah, maybe the aftermags will write about it, but it won't really interfere with other stuff too much. Vince did it thinking it was and always would be under the radar. And here we have it today to watch on YouTube as a masterpiece. God bless whoever curated that into the McMemphis series, because it's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just one of those, like, I debated so much. I was debating between that and WrestlePalooza 97. And I was like, oh, I had to include the greatest hour of pro wrestling TV ever. But, like, my honorable mention is McMemphis because of, like, it's so surreal seeing, like, him send out, like, all these WWF henchmen to take down Jerry Lawler. And then at the same time, on WWE TV, Lawler's the jerk commentator on Superstars. And you're watching with them. It's like, huh?
Yeah. It just...
I used to wonder if Memphis just didn't get WWF.
Well, I would read in the aftermags about how Lawler would go on Memphis TV and say, I'm fighting fire with fire. Those Yankees up there, they're a bunch of jerks that look down on us. So Lawler could always explain away whatever he was doing. You know what it was, actually? I mean, I don't know that I want to go down this path, but Jerry Lawler, I would say 20-plus years ahead of time, was going to the Donald Trump playbook in Memphis. It was the equivalent of owning the libs at the time. I'm going up there and I'm getting them mad, which should make you happy.
Okay. Yeah. Like, where's she going with this? I see what she did there.
Yes. It might have taken me a while to work around to the point, but the point in the end I trust is one that you got. But
no, absolutely, yeah, I got it. It's like, okay.
Exactly.
Even at the time when that was going on, I was always like, because I remember being younger and coming home and, like, some of the greatest feuds I'd see would be, like, you released that Pro Wrestling on Channel 23 in Akron, like, every day at, like, 4 o'clock.
I was just about to ask you that. Yeah, I had fun watching some of the USWA stuff.
And, like, it'd be great because, like, Monday would be Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and be watching Smoky Mountain on Mondays, and all the USWA guys would be on there, and all these fat guys, and everybody would be like, boo, and, like, get these jerks out of here, get Tracy Slow, whatever, and I'm like, you'd go on to the next show, and you'd have, USWA, and all the Smoky Mountain guys would run in, and
right.
They were the bad guys, except for Tommy Rich. Everybody just hated him.
Well, that's true. Across both promotions. I always used to wonder about that, too. As somebody who at least knew a little bit about the business at the time, just a little bit emphasis on, of like, why are they sending these shows up to an area that they don't promote in? But I was just grateful that they did. And 23 was perfect for it. It was one of those quirky kind of things because it was always an ABC affiliate that didn't necessarily feel like it. Because just like the kind of stuff that they would carry would just be so quirky, weird syndicated stuff, weird reruns. The only Akron-based station in the market. And again, it sort of, I think the fact that it was an Akron station as opposed to Cleveland, it always felt like more of an independent station. Like, yes, you'd get the ABC, primetime stuff, news, sports, whatever, but in between, there was always room for good stuff like Smoky Mountain and the USWA.
Yeah, I mean, and I grew up on that. So, like, I grew up having a little black and white TV, and one of those, like, little clear see-through TVs that wasn't see-through. And I used to have, like, the UHF and the VHF channels, and I could get in 23 better than I could, you know, E5 or Channel 5.
Sure.
So, it was just a cool movie because, like, you know, they'd have news on, and actually talk about Akron. I'd be like, well, I know where this is.
Yeah.
Every other news was all about stuff that was nowhere near me. So, it was like, you know, then they have wrestling on every day. Then I believe they used to have, like, WWF Spotlight on, and at, like, maybe, like, midnight or 2
Right.
a.m. I used to always ask my mom to stay up and watch it. She always told me no. Thanks, Mom. You were probably right.
And see, it was always the opposite for me in good old Parma, Ohio at the time, where 23 was the one that would come in fuzzy. But I always enjoyed watching 23. It just like had a different feel to it, and the wrestling was only a part of that. For the greatest matches, the 3 matches that each of us would recommend here, ultimately it is just on this one, me, you, and Ron Glasnap. I will start with Ron's one, and we've referenced a couple of these things here previously. Number 1 on his list was Macho and the Warrior from WrestleMania 7, which I would say is one of the great overachievement matches of all time, probably right next to Hogan Warrior from WrestleMania 6. As far as
Warrior was in both of them. What does that mean? Does he deserve credit?
Yeah, I guess so. And Macho deserves.
Or is it props to Macho?
Props to Macho for carrying him. I don't know who gets the credit for WrestleMania 6. I understand Pat Patterson laid it out almost move for move, so maybe it's Pat Patterson for that one, Macho for this one. But yeah, Warrior was capable of being one of 2 wrestlers in a great match, which, I mean, look, that's more than you can say for a lot of people. It might sound like damning with faint praise, because it is, but not everybody can be one half of a great match. Macho's the guy that can make it happen.
I don't recall when Lex Luger was ever one half of a great match. He worked with some awesome people.
I feel like that guy's career.
I take that back. One time he was 1/4 of a great match when he teamed up with Sting to take on the Steiner.
I was just about to say, yeah, at the Super Brawl 1 in '91.
Yeah, that's the only one I can think of.
He had a really good run. Didn't he have a really good? I mean, I'm going to stick up for him, not least of which because he's been a multi-time guest on the show. He had a really good run as a heel in '89, did he not?
Yeah, he did.
I mean, that was.
Maybe I'm discrediting him. He had some fun ones.
You know what it is, though, and I've talked about this on the show before.
He was light years ahead of the Warrior.
Well, sure.
I found that the Warrior all of a sudden got loved because he died, and it's like you realize the best thing that could have happened to him was dying because with all the let me hear this out. Because like the whole big Me Too movement and stuff, his name would have been tarnished, and now it's like stuff would have come out of his comments and he said nothing. Now that he's gone, they just sweep that under the rug and act like it never happened. If you saw what they did to Hogan, what the stuff came out about Warrior? Yeah, he would have been like, they would have done the same thing. So, because I'm not saying it's a good thing that he died, but as far as his legacy goes, I mean, he's remembered with very rose-colored glasses because of the way he passed away.
Well, Jake, I'm going to paraphrase the man and say that I'm sure he would say that your comment doesn't make the world go round.
You're picking up what I'm putting down.
I am exactly picking up what you're putting down. And for anybody else out there, I'm not going to say it any more explicitly than that. Go do a Google search on Warrior and doesn't make the world go round, and you'll see what we're talking about. But
you're going to go down a rabbit hole, and you're going to be like, this guy has a after him.
Yes, and you'll see probably video after video of social justice warriors having their heads explode in his comments.
In today's day and age, he'd probably be the mayor or governor of Parts Unknown.
He very well might be. Yeah, I don't think they like gay people in Parts Unknown. So that was. we are predictably going off the rails here. I'll steer slightly back in the direction of the rails by mentioning that Ron's second pick, he doesn't say which one, but Flair Steamboat. Ultimately, you can't go wrong with any of the ones in the trilogy. I picked one out. I named one of the ones in the trilogy for my three. Ron also, and I hinted at this before, Ron puts down the first TLC from WrestleMania 17. So your thoughts on it being an empty spot fest of a match, choreographed cooperation, whatever. Not shared.
Okay. I think that's just me. I've seen so many ladder matches over the years that I've desensitized to it.
Right.
And it being the first one ever at its time, it was amazing. I actually prefer the triangle ladder match over that match.
Okay.
But that's just my personal preference. I just like that one better. I thought it was less contrived watching it back. Because they hadn't done it before, so they didn't know what they were doing. At this point, they kind of started to get the formula down.
Right.
Certain things that became quickly responsive. That's all. I just like that one, you know. And I'm biased to the Hardys and Andrew Christian because you were there.
I can understand that. I will say this, that when you look at it, I am somebody, this is another unpopular take of mine, but as somebody who didn't see the Michaels versus Razor ladder match 1 at WrestleMania 10, that's another one that watching it back after I had seen, in my estimation, better ladder matches, I was like, doesn't hold up. So I think that's another take I have that Kyle Ross does not share with me.
What, that it doesn't hold, that the original ladder match doesn't hold up?
Yeah, I know his disagreement on that is profound.
I mean, I can see his side, I can see your side. 3 years ago, I would be like, no, it doesn't hold up. But now I'm like, I actually kind of like it better because it doesn't have all the spots and stuff in it. It just happens to be two guys having a match, and there's a ladder in the ring.
Very interesting.
There's not 37 ladders. It's just like there's two guys and a ladder that's there.
Yeah.
And the ending's so brilliant where Shawn falls down, he gets his arm cut, and it's done, and his leg's done.
Exactly.
He didn't go flying through 37 tables and then lie there until it was his turn it was his spot there, or whatever. Literally, his spot was low. He was like, oh crap, there he is. And then he gets up and runs in and pushes over a set. It's like, man,
right.
I see it. They can't do anything else. What you're either going to run or you're going to fall or get the table. So, no, I don't look back and say, oh, that match is terrible. No, that match is great. It's a 5-star match. And everything after this is just trying to compete. It can't.
It's it's a little bit more polarizing perhaps than a lot of wrestling fans might feel than it is. I don't think anybody thinks it's a bad match, but there are certainly gradations that some of us feel as far as how great it is versus other things.
Yeah.
You look at my 3 matches here that I have.
It's the toughest match they've ever did. I'll tell you that.
Exactly. Yeah.
When it took off those guys, yeah, nothing but respect. You know, in the old star column, that'd be one of those 6 stars. Just because everything it did after the fact. It influenced everything. Every multi-man ladder match ever spent since then has been a rip-off of that.
White courtesy phone, Omega, Okada, and Dave Meltzer. White courtesy phone, Omega, Okada, and Dave Meltzer. You can't.
They're going to listen to Kenny Omega talk for 2 hours about nonsense.
Yeah. Well, you can't mention 6 stars without getting that kind of reference from me. It's obligatory. So, by the way, speaking of snowflakes, there is a lot of them to go around on the 3 matches that I'm going to name. I said before WrestleMania 17, and that again, while the ending, and this is one of these things where, profound disagreement between me and Kyle Ross on this, that he felt like the ending not only destroyed the match, but destroyed the show because it was one of the worst endings business-wise in wrestling history. I won't disagree with him on that, but as far as like in the moment, and when we're talking streaming stuff here, I mean, there's different ways of watching stuff, but I think all of us are sort of getting in the moment. And to me, as I said, if you want to see Rock and Austin at the peak of their powers, that's the match there. Because Rock Austin 1 was actually kind of unwieldy at WrestleMania 15. Didn't really live up to the expectations. It was a little bit flatter than some people thought. Rock Austin 3 at WrestleMania 19 was pretty good, but there was just, to me, again, and had we known ahead of time that it was Austin's last match, we might have looked at it differently. It just felt like, oh, they're matching them up again, and this time Rock is going to be a heel again. But Rock Austin 2 is my favorite. Hart Austin 2 is pretty much the only Hart Austin match that anybody really talks about for the most part. The first match, Survivor Series 96 at the Garden, was really good. No question about it. It was really good. But the one at WrestleMania 13 changed the era, basically, because it was really the beginning of the Austin 316 movement as a face. It got him over as a monster face. Biggest one in the company since Hogan. And again, huge match business-wise. So compelling to watch, so exciting, and just really, really outstanding. So, Rock Austin 2, Hart Austin 2. Is this going to be a theme, Jake Digman? I've got a match in the Flair Steamboat trilogy. Which one do you think it is?
You seem like the kind of guy that would go for the Super Bowl Clash match.
Yes.
Or the Clash match at the Superdome.
Yes, Ragin' Cajun. I swear to God, I wasn't going for the second match in all of these ones here. It just worked out that way. That's one of those things, gun to my head, it's the favorite. All three of those are great. The match in Chicago at Chi-Town Rumble in February of '89, it had the shock value, especially of Tommy Young making the count there. Tommy Young, who he had been led to believe over a period of time was biased in Flair's favor just because Flair had gotten so many of the cheap breaks from him. But Tommy Young's the one that runs in and makes the count. You have the one in the middle there. You have the big classic where Flair gets it back, Music City Showdown, 89 in Nashville. And you can't go wrong picking any of those three. By the way, I had never known this before. I just saw something on YouTube recently where this was documented. Did you know that WWF at the time did a house show in the same building in Nashville the night before, and they deliberately ran long, and there were all kinds of things they did to screw with the preparations for the next day, not least of which running a show the day before. Yeah, go look that up, everybody. It's an interesting story. One of these wrestling documentary folks broke it down and got into the details of it, and it's a great story. But I mean, those three right there, I mean, you got to admit, you can't go wrong with those three recommendations that I have, just like the ones that Ron had.
Oh, absolutely not. Those are three of the greatest matches in the history of pro wrestling. I actually know on one of yours, this is my personal preference.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, my favorite of the trilogy with The Rock and Austin is actually number 3.
Okay.
Only because what it did represent, if we're talking long term, we've got to take into account what it did. As far as longevity and everything else that came after it. I don't know if we're looking at the bubble in just that match or the overall arc, but knowing that it was Steve Austin's last match and just knowing everything that went through with it, my favorite Rock character was Douchebag Elliot. I thought he was that was his perfect character.
Right.
And he was so great. And we're just like, no, I remember going to Raw in Cleveland in 2003 when he lost to the Hurricane. Were you at that show?
I was not.
So he loses to the Hurricane, and as I recall, at the end of the show, The Rock does this whole thing, and that's the same show where he sang the song about Cleveland, Rock getting drafted, Cleveland sucks.
Yeah.
And, it was that show. So at the end of the crowd, you think that he didn't want to boo him, right? So he's leaving, and Austin gets in the sun or whatever, and Rock gets up, and he's like, grabs the microphone, and he's like, hey, I'm okay. I'm going to leave, and the crowd starts cheering for Rocky. He's like, I thought you said you town sucks all night long. So you can chant Rocky, you can chant Rocky sucks. And the crowd just kept chanting Rocky. So he goes, all right. He goes, all right, we're doing it then. And he goes, and he's a whole when the Rock is cooking, and he left in the meeting. Cool.
That is outstanding. Yeah, that whole thing, and he was great in that character, but I felt like they backed into it completely. Because The Rock is a guy, and this is somebody, I've talked about this on the show over a period of time with Kyle Ross. I talked about it with Sean Oliver when he was on the show. I might have mentioned it with you before, but the term that I've coined, the white meatification of all baby faces. Of, over a period of time, like in '99, Rock was still very edgy as a face. But that kind of eroded because Vince wanted his baby faces to be white meat. And I'm not saying he ever regressed to being Rocky Maivia, because that would be impossible, but basically, The Rock works best as a douchebag face, basically. And if he's going to be blander than that, then he's going to have to be a douchebag heel, because they're going to boo him again.
Yeah. So, and I mean, the problem is when he goes heel, his heel's so good, he becomes a baby
Oh, there's a shelf life,
like,
yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I think now it's to the point now he's just, he's the Rock. He transcends everything.
Yeah, very much so. And that was, again, sort of an exclamation point to that era. We were already out of the Attitude Era and into the Ruthless Aggression Era by '03. But that was the end of Austin as an in-ring performer. That was the end of The Rock as a full-time in-ring performer, if you want to call him that, because keep in mind, he had come back just for those couple months leading up to Mania, so he was almost sort of a part-timer by then. He would be a complete part-timer after that. You go to...
Interesting. When was... What would you say, the end of '01 when he left to go film Scorpion King? You think that was the end of his full-time run? Because I don't recall really going full-time after that.
Well, I mean, it was all different stretches because, yeah, he missed a good part of the spring and summer of '01. He came back. It was sort of a continuous run until post-Mania '02. And then he came back over the summer. He came back a little bit sooner than he was going to because of the void of Austin being out. Left again.
Oh, yeah, he put over Brock and then left.
Yeah, exactly. He was... I think he was always supposed to be in that match, but as far as the previous month's pay-per-view, I don't know that he was necessarily supposed to be in that one. I think that was one where he came back as a favor to the company. He went away again, and then, yeah, so I think you're right about that, but it's a thing where he was a part-timer that could pass for a full-timer leading up to Mania 19. I think that's how I would call it, because he would have prolonged runs in the company. From there on in, it would never be anything more than, okay, this has got a limited shelf life on how long he's back. And, it was the end for Austin. So, yes, that was the closure match of the three, and I can understand appreciating it on that level. Two matches that you have for your three are from the same year, albeit in different companies, both multi-man matches. One would be very easy to anticipate because it's the favorite Royal Rumble match of everybody of all time, Royal Rumble 92 match. The War Games 92 match, Sting's Squadron v Dangerous Alliance. If I go back to that before, that's the period of time I've done a little rewatching in. And then Money in the Bank 11, the WWE title match with Cena and Punk. And all of the... I always thought there was a lot of callbacks in that match to Cena on RVD years earlier, 5 years earlier, at the Hammerstein Center as far as Cena being on enemy turf, so to speak. But three really, really great matches and three completely different types of matches.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Somebody tried to call my phone and, I had to click it real quick.
What poor timing.
Breaking it. What's that? Yeah, right, exactly. The Royal Rumble 1992, obviously, I mean, I think you said it best. And then, I'm sorry, Rick, what was the last two? What did you say?
So,
This part.
War Games... Yeah, War Games 92 and Cena Punk from Money in the Bank 2011. Are you going to make any changes?
Okay. No, I'm not going to make any changes. I stand by those.
Okay.
That crowd made that match exciting.
Right.
It's with Cena and Punk.
Mm-hmm.
As far as Cena, one of their matches all time to watch, I stick with that. And then on the other side of it, the War Games 92. To me, that's the best War Games match ever.
That,
And to me, it's great story. Look at that. I threw Paul Heyman in again.
yeah, how about that? How about that? And I've always felt, too, that when you talk about, because when I mentioned earlier about 92 to 93, the changes in the company and really no continuity, and that match right there, it's very interesting. This is no fault of that match, but this is something I know Kyle and I had talked about previously on the show, that when you look at it, so what, 3 months later, this whole thing, I've always hated how when a new booker comes in, everything is so transparent. They just throw out everything that's there before and do it their way. And Bill Watts being determined to put Ron Simmons at the top of the card. 3 months later, okay, you had the guys that WCW was telling you were the top 5 baby faces in the promotion at that time on Sting's team. Ron Simmons, at best, was number 6 on the depth chart in a kayfabe sense. 3 months later, he's world champion. Nice continuity.
Yeah. That's the thing that's all of the, unfortunately, the WCW at the time. And it's one of those really, it's just sad because I look back and that was rose-colored glasses. Like, I really won't remember you fondly and like you. But then it's like, no, you weren't very good.
Yeah.
Glimpses of greatness I kind of...
Sure, nothing wrong with that.
I tried to think of the matches that were worked on the cards that I picked, too.
Sure. Well, and
I was trying to, like, diversify as much as I possibly could. It was just kind of my goal to bring in some, that crowd is the best crowd. The Punk Cena is the best crowd ever at a wrestling show.
Oh, yeah. Oh, very much so.
Smart marquee, one-sided, like, ECW, you get to sit out. You get nothing compared to Chicago. That night.
Well, and what does it tell you, too? What an indictment of the product. I mean, they can brag about the business that they did in the short term and how it was received in the short term, but there's a commonality, there's a through line between you putting the Cena Punk match on there and me putting Mania 30 on my list of top cards. In both cases, it was the people rebelling against what was being shoved down their throats. The best business that the WWE has done since the Attitude Era is a couple of instances where they were basically booking the promotion as a heel that was completely out of touch from the people, which basically, by the way, was exactly what they were. If I was a promoter, I wouldn't be looking to try to make money off of my own obliviousness. I'd be trying to make money off my own skill as a promoter.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately, I think, Dana White summed it up a lot of promoters, including himself. Sometimes, they'll just satiate their own ego. They'll step over $1 just to pick up a dime.
Yeah. And, well, in these instances, again, it's showing that there can be some gems even amidst that. And again, as far as the War Games thing, I want to go back to that for a second to put you over for mentioning that one, because 92, and this is one of the great things on the network, too, and this was primarily, I think, from that winter and spring, so many great, a lot of times six-man tags on TV, but combinations of these guys, Sting/Sting's buddies against the Dangerous Alliance, so many great TV matches of the time. And that's a thing where, again, you and I will look back at 92 in WCW and look at what more it could have been with all of the talent there, both the experienced talent and the emerging talent. But what it was in isolated instances here and there was pretty damn good. I can tell you that from watching Super Brawl as well. If you just take it for the moments, there were a lot of great moments in 92, particularly, I think, in the first half.
I absolutely agree with you. It's the reason why on my 2K16 game, my downloaded characters, I guess, predominantly consist of, like, I've got ECW, like, an ECW roster, and then I've got ECW pretty much from a 91 until pre-Hogan.
Yeah.
I don't have, like, but yeah, so, and I just do some fun matchups, so that, like, I was able to, to convert at Jericho there, you could get Japan and stuff. And, that's just my favorite era of wrestling, and I really wish, someone would have done it. I especially was good. Like, I look back on it, like, enjoying all of the people who were there, like, mentioned, like, the roster. At the time, I was a kid, so to me, it was wrestling so stupid. But if you look at it as a like, man, why has this actually been? This could have been so good.
Exactly.
It could be on.
Well, and I will tell you this, that one of the great nuggets from old friend Liam O'Rourke's book about Brian Pillman, the great book about his life, The Loose Cannon. Maybe the funniest thing in the entire book when you look at that, and something that sums up that era of WCW and how they were their own worst enemy in terms of how much better it could have been, was that when they broke up the Hollywood Blondes, which we look back on as a seminal dumbass moment in time because of how much more they could have done with any kind of a run together, and a team that only really worked with a handful of teams, and we remember them as being so great. Imagine if they'd have been working with some of these other teams over a period of time. It was, according to the book.
The Hollywood Blondes actually just formed on the episode of Saturday Night that I was watching last night.
Very interesting. Okay, yeah. I mean, because it goes from what, December of 92, and they didn't even call them the Hollywood Blondes until what, like February, I think. And
it was like, I started watching January of 1993.
January, okay, yeah. And that was, and their run was pretty much done by August, and of course they got scapegoated for the June Clash of Champions rating, that the June Clash didn't draw a big rating in Flair's return match, and they got scapegoated. And it was Greg Gagne, if you believe the story in this book, and Liam's reporting I think was pretty awesome, so I'll go with it. Greg Gagne, who went to them and said, "We're going to break you up because you're just not that over." Greg Gagne told him that, Jake.
I don't think Greg Gagne had a job. Like, you talk about a guy, I don't know, I was watching one of the, I think it was like, Hawkins and Ryan or one of their toy shows. And he did they were talking about FCW or something, or then he's asked him, like, one of the dudes, I forget who it was, and he's like, oh yeah, you came up under, did you come under Greg Gagne? And he's like, did he tell you to throw like this, like you were eating lasagna? And I was just like, duh. I don't know why, but I just lost it laughing at the visual of that. Like, yeah, that's just because Greg Gagne could not throw a punch.
No.
I don't know, he looked like, Greg Gagne looked at the dude who was like, working out, like the car lot or something.
He did, and like,
I guess I'm gonna go in now and wrestle. Like,
well, listen, all the hipsters on the top hipster message boards, I'm sure, would tell us, well, you got to go watch his stuff with the High Flyers, him and Brunzell from the late 70s, early 80s. I haven't watched a ton of it, but I haven't seen anything post Brunzell that holds up in Greg Gagne's career. I'm sorry.
I mean, do I know with all the stuff that exists? We're talking about stuff that's streaming. Do I really need to go back and watch 70s Greg Gagne and Joe Brunzell? What are you gonna say next? I should probably check out the light heavyweight championship reign of rock and roll fucking super.
You know, well, here's the thing too, and this would almost be funny for trolling Kyle Ross with, but I also believed it. It was, in retrospect, wouldn't Brad Riggins, and I know they weren't doing this at the time, but wouldn't Brad Riggins have made a pretty good shooter character at the time? He was legit.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
he absolutely would have.
I don't know how much money there could have been in that, because they weren't doing that in the 80s. They really weren't doing any type of, you know, this guy's the real deal kind of a thing. It was basically anybody with big muscles was the real deal. So, you know, somebody who was a collegiate shooter wouldn't fit in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And while we're on the topic, you know, we're kind of praising the WWE now before we can get shame on the WWE Network for the lack of AWA.
There needs to be more.
There's none.
Yeah. Well,
like, you know, I mean, yeah, but you have all of your stuff up there. Like, I would love to know the streaming number of somebody who went back and watched Raw from like February of 2012.
Well, I will tell you this. Yeah, that's a good point. I actually sat and watched the rotting carcass that was Super Brawl 3, so I kind of understand why there might not be that much more footage up there. Oh dear God, that was awful. And David McLean, was that the guy's name? The guy that was the promoter of the promotion that came after Glow. Glow was dead by this point, and they were doing some kind of god-awful knockoff type thing with a battle royal with these broads, and oh my God, I mean, awful, awful show.
I don't recall that. However, one thing that is, I don't recall that one at all, but I was just going to think of a battle royal on the WWE Network. Under the Hidden Gems, there's a Legends battle royal that's very much worth watching. Okay. It's not good, but when you see the names that come out in it, you're like, holy crap!
Is that the 87 house show?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one that was like.
Have you seen that?
I haven't. I gotta watch it. That's, you know what that one's famous for is Lanny Poffo saying that caused bitterness in Savage that he took to his grave because I think they didn't include his dad in that match. They didn't think he was a big enough star.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know of the match, but I don't know the match. Yeah, and that.
It is definitely worth a watch. And then there's interviews with the guys afterwards. But like as a fan, I don't want to spoil who's all in it. But it's like if they were in their prime, this would have been the mecca royals.
Sure. I'm afraid I just spoiled it by saying no Angelo Poffo. So for all of you Angelo Poffo fans out there who want to watch his stuff on streaming, yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't remember who's all in it. I know like Bachwinkle's in it, Lou Fez is in it.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, okay. Dominic Yaguchi, I remember, was in it. It's Renee Goulet's in it. I think Ray Stevens might be in it.
Was Buddy Rogers in it?
Maybe, I don't recall. Chief J. Strongbow's in it.
If they did a spot where Bruno was going after Buddy Rogers and one of the announcers said, "Look at how scared Buddy looks. It looks like he might have a heart attack." That would have been outstanding.
I mean, I don't know. Just get Joey Styles on it.
Yeah. Oh.
The 3 worst sports foreshadowing of pay-per-view history.
Yes.
So, one night stand. If you don't know that, is Googling it.
Exactly. So there's not much AWA on there. I mean, there's some scattered things on there that you can find. I believe Wrestle Rock 86 is on there. I haven't had the bravery to sit through that one. Although Bockwinkel Hansen, just to see how badly that Vern might be able to botch that one, that might be worth a look, because Bockwinkel's one of my favorites of all time, and Hansen is somebody that I've always appreciated as a big Haas-type guy who can really go. So, again, the bulk of what's there, of course, is the WWE library, ECW, with all their shows and pay-per-views, WCW likewise. And that is where most of our recommendations come from here tonight. I think almost everything here can be referenced in some form or fashion. You go back to, again, the earlier days for some of the wrestlers recommended, Daniel Bryan, Seth Rollins, Aleister Black, Asuka. Yeah, you might have to go to other sources if you really want to find some of their best stuff, but just about everything we put over is on the WWE Network and worthy streaming recommendations in these tough times, Jake Digman.
Yeah, and look up on YouTube McMemphis if you want to check that
Yes.
out. If it's not on there, just Google McMemphis. I'm sure it'll pop up on one of those videos.
Yes, that is the ultimate consolation prize for any of us to put on there. We didn't list it on any of our lists here, but the ultimate honorable mention has to be McMemphis. And so again, I love it. We always try to give you something a little bit more on this show. So we give you the streaming recommendations in those three categories, a little bonus McMemphis. There's always a real bonus coming through whenever you're talking to my good friend, FDH Lounge Dignitary, our MMA editor, Jake Digman. Always a little something extra special in there. And Jake, what a pleasure breaking it down with you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it, my friend. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this mini episode of the FDH Lounge.